having a conversation with the lead NFL insider for CBS. He is part of the NFL Today starting this season. Additionally, he is going to provide reporting and analysis for CBS Sports HQ, CBS Sports Podcast, CBSSports.com, and CBS Sports Network. He is Jonathan Jones. Jonathan, it is great to have you on the show. Jonathan, how are you?
I'm doing well. I appreciate the introduction. I'm happy to be back on with you.
My guy, good to have you back on. So listen, there is a lot to talk about around the league, and I know you do not want to make it about yourself, but in terms of that introduction, it was announced that you are the lead NFL insider for CBS, which means you are going to be a part of the NFL Today starting this fall. Congratulations on this great new gig. How does it feel, and how much are you looking forward to all of this?
Yeah, well, thank you, and it's just a blessing, really, and I'm so grateful and humbled and honored, and all those words. Yesterday when it was announced, I was expecting, friends and loved ones to reach out, but really the outpouring of support that I got from so many folks in this industry and outside of this industry was immense, almost overwhelming, I might say. But I'm excited to be with this crew, these guys, the folks behind the scenes as well. So very, very excited to get started. Good
for you and well-earned. Jonathan Jones joining us. Listen, before we get to football, I know that you were in the Garden last night for Game 3 of the finals. What was the atmosphere like in the building?
Well, you could hear some of the atmosphere on television, I believe. Klay Thompson had some things to think about the atmosphere. Listen, I'm not a Bostonian. I happen to live up here, but things are a bit different up here when it comes to fandom. But the energy, I've been going to games all season, and the energy here is just so different than really any other NBA team or arena that I've been to. And last night, it was a hot Garden, back like the old days. And I'm so glad that we're getting competitive NBA Finals games. So I think the C's are going to do it. Maybe in 5, but I'll give them 6. But the Celtics will win the final.
Jonathan Jones is joining us. All right, in terms of football, the Rams announced yesterday they agreed to an extension with Kupp. What are your thoughts on that deal and how Kupp approached it?
Yeah, Kupp and his representation had long told the Rams, listen, we don't need to be the highest paid wide receiver in NFL history. Now, he got plenty of guaranteed money, and they wanted some sort of mile markers, if you will, that they could say, hey, this is coming off. Arguably, I think it is the greatest receiving season in NFL history. And then when you look what he did in the postseason, how he got better in each successive game, he was due this money. And so I know that there were some fans out there who thought, okay, well, this must have gotten done because the Aaron Donald deal got done. No, both of these were always going to get done about 5 seconds after that Joe Burrow pass fell incomplete in the Super Bowl there on 4th down. So Cooper is a fantastic guy. And listen, he understands that he wants to be with the Rams. He doesn't want to go chase that money. He wants rings, and that's the sort of give and take that he and his representation decided on, and you have to respect it.
Jonathan Jones is joining us. Jonathan, so from a team standpoint, what do you make of this? For instance, they had been busy with the Aaron Donald extension. To your point, they knew that as soon as that game ended, they would take care of these guys, but how do they take care of these guys? For instance, how do you make, or what do you make of how they've gone about taking care of their business and making it somehow all work underneath the cap?
Yeah, well, that the cap is certainly interesting. I know that some folks say the cap is a myth. I know some folks say the cap is real. The cap can be finagled, and the Rams have certainly done that. You have to have ownership who is willing to give a ton of money in signing bonus and upfront to guys, and also be able to put that money in escrow, right? They have to be liquid enough in order to do that when they hand out these big contracts. You also have to be comfortable and confident in your scouting staff, because you're not going to have first-round picks, right? You said, we don't need those first-round picks. We need Jalen Ramsey, and we need Matthew Stafford. All right, well, that 4th rounder, who on a number of teams, that would be your backup safety who's contributing on special teams in his rookie year. No, that guy may have to start once you get to week 7 because of how you've decided to construct your team. So, it's thin margins. But when you have so many blue-chip players like they do, they very well understand at every level of the defense, they have a guy who will be a Hall of Famer. And really, I think the only team in the NFL that can say that.
We're talking to Jonathan Jones. All right, so one more thought about the Rams. I did have Les Snead on the show yesterday, and he did seem very interested in bringing Odell Beckham Jr. back as well. Could you see that happening?
Absolutely. I mean, Odell Beckham Jr. is a new father. He has the home there in Southern California. Things went very well, obviously, for him with the Rams. It's familiar. He's going to be able to continue rehabbing his ACL in familiar territory. So it would make a lot of sense for him personally. But also, hey, if he can recover and wants to choose his spot, I wouldn't mind catching passes from Aaron Rodgers, who could certainly use him as well. So I would have the Rams at 1, and I would have the Packers at 1A.
We're talking to Jonathan Jones for a few more moments. Jonathan, new topic. The New York Times reported that the Houston Texans used their resources to help Deshaun Watson's massage habit. In addition to that, we saw the 24th lawsuit was filed against him. There were some extremely graphic details. That New York Times piece from Jenny Vrentas had some things that were pretty unbelievable. Overall, what were your reactions to everything that's come out this week regarding that story?
Yeah, well, Jenny is a fantastic reporter and a very close friend of mine, and she did an incredible job like she has been for the past year and a half plus on this story. As someone who has read each civil lawsuit as they have been filed, these details in the 23rd and the 24th lawsuits, certainly very graphic. The allegations certainly very disturbing. However, they are not dissimilar to the majority of what I and others have read and heard through interviews in the other 22 lawsuits. And so there was nothing necessarily even eye-opening about the number of masseuses being at 66 because we knew that number was even over 40. I guess, and it's difficult to say, Jim, but we have become, if you've paid enough attention to this, the details and the allegations, all of which are disturbing, I've gotten used to what they are, if that sort of makes sense. And so I think some folks who haven't been paying as much attention, when all of these details are sort of coupled into one full story and not in separate lawsuits that you need to log in to get into and read, it really opens up a lot of people's eyes. And so I think that's what we have seen this weekend. And certainly this idea that the Houston Texans security director furnished an NDA for Deshaun Watson, allegedly. I mean, I've never heard of anything like that. I've talked with sources around the league the past couple of days about that. Never heard anything like that. As far as the Houston Texans helping him secure a massage area in a hotel, teams do and offer plenty of perks for plenty of star players. But even that, I was talking with a source earlier today. They said, yeah, even that is not something that I think that we, speaking about their team, that we would even do. So those details were incredible to read, and obviously the NFL is going to have to fully investigate what the Houston Texans knew and when they knew it.
Jonathan Jones joining us. So one last thought. What about the Browns? I mean, we can go a number of different ways with that, but what about as it relates to Baker Mayfield, Jonathan? So where does that leave Cleveland and Baker Mayfield? Because they did excuse him from mandatory minicamp. What do you make of the way they have handled that, and where do things stand with Mayfield?
Yeah, I think it's been difficult for the Cleveland Browns of their own making, right? Once they got into the Deshaun Watson, if you want to call it sweepstakes, they knew that they were going to potentially alienate Baker Mayfield. Once they got Deshaun Watson, they knew Baker Mayfield was out of there. And Baker knows that he's done there. There's this fantasy that folks think, well, hey, if Deshaun is suspended for half of a season or a full season, that maybe the Browns can reconcile with Baker Mayfield. No, that ship has sailed, and it sailed long ago. So now, what do the Browns need to do? They are posturing as though they can hold on to Mayfield throughout training camp, and then when an unfortunate injury happens to a team starter, they could then trade Mayfield. I don't think that they really want to wait that long because while they can excuse him from mandatory minicamp, he still has to report to training camp. He would still have to be in the building, as I understand it, as it's written in the CBA. So I don't think they want it to drag on that far. The Carolina Panthers are a very interested party, but they will not pay $18.85 million. David Tepper, the owner of the Panthers, will not pay half of that. And so I'm about to write for CBSSports.com. Maybe Baker Mayfield, if he really wants out of Cleveland, if Cleveland wants to rid themselves of Baker Mayfield, and if the Carolina Panthers want to bring on Baker Mayfield, he may have to take a pay cut. He may have to say, I know I have almost $19 million in guaranteed money. let me take it down to 12 or 13. The Browns pay a majority of that. The Panthers kick in 5 or 6, and he has the leg up on Sam Darnold to be the week 1 starter in Carolina.
Interesting. One last thought. The Patriots and Mac Jones were interesting in the sense that he's been getting rave reviews. That you, though, were at camp earlier this week. What did you make of Mac Jones, and how did he look to you?
He looked great. You could tell that his body was different. He was throwing some really good seam balls to running backs. Listen, as good as he looked, I still don't know what this offensive system is ultimately going to be. Right. They're changing the terminology there. You don't really know if Joe Judge or Matt Patricia or both of them or some conglomeration will be calling all of the plays. So there's a lot to be determined. But in that minicamp practice, Mac Jones looked like a very solid year 2 starter.
Jonathan, finally, as a follow, what did you think? Was Patricia doing most of the talking to the quarterbacks? How do you think that plays out?
I wouldn't at all be surprised if Bill Belichick is the offensive coordinator, because the guy, he can do it. Matt Patricia was relaying and speaking more to the quarterbacks than I was anticipating heading into training or to minicamp. We had sort of heard that Joe Judge had been working more with the quarterbacks, and he still was, but Patricia was more involved. And just a few minutes ago, the Patriots said, "Hey, we're canceling next week's OTAs. We'll see you guys at training camp." An interesting thing with this new staff, with this new terminology, with a team that needs to take another step this upcoming season, they say, you know what? We don't need more practice.
That does not seem like the Patriot way at all. That is interesting. He is the lead NFL insider for CBS, part of the NFL Today starting this season.